Hi, this is Michael Josephson for the Josephson Institute of Ethics. I hope you've already been introduced to the basic structure of how we hope you'll be thinking about the ethical opportunities and constraints on business. And you'll remember that the 6 pillars of character, the idea that trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship is sort of the matrix of how we're going to look at and define individual behavior. But I'm often asked the question, well, what does that really have to do with ethics the way my company approaches it? Because almost all companies today are in at least what we call a compliance mode. Ever since Sarbanes-Oxley and other kinds of rules and statutes, the fact is there are an awful lot of specific things that you're expected to do. And in many industries, there are so many regulations, such as the banking industry or the defense industry or the others, that those rules themselves are like the laws of doing the right thing. And that's what we call compliance. I want to talk to you about the difference between a pure compliance program and what we call a compliance plus program, and one that really defines how you can get more out of your organization and reduce the likelihood that you will be in problems. You may remember we also talk about ethics not only as a virtue, doing the right thing because it is the right thing, but because it's the smart thing, because of a risk management strategy. Now understand, compliance is still a basic minimum. Every good organization has to have an effective compliance program. And to have an effective compliance program, you have to be concerned with 2 dimensions. One is, you really have to be sure that the employees know what it is they're supposed to do or not do. Because the fact of the matter is, not all of these rules are intuitively obvious. It isn't intuitively obvious that you may not be able to have a moonlighting job in certain areas because it's a conflict of interest. It's not intuitively obvious whether or not you can accept or give gifts of certain ways in certain settings. So the first thing we want to be sure is there is an informational dimension to the compliance program. But that makes really boring programs. And if you have a training program that's just designed to try to teach people the rules, they're going to hate it, they're going to be bored, and they won't remember it anyway. So what you want to be sure to do is that you have to isolate and identify the things an employee needs to know and find more practical ways. Normally having them read it, maybe doing an online test of it, maybe in some form or another reinforce it. But don't spend all your time teaching people the rules. And certainly don't spend all your time dealing with the nuances of how do I really know how much this, thing is worth. We need to be certain that you've identified what it is an employee needs to know, and you need to realize that in many cases that is functionally specific. For example, in many codes of conduct that your companies may have, there are going to be all kinds of rules, including you can't price fix. Well, that's a pretty important rule for people who have the power to price fix, but only a tiny fraction of any people who work in your company could even remotely approach price fixing. And yet if we're teaching the janitors and we're teaching the manufacturing people and we're teaching the secretaries and the marketing people and spending their time telling them that they can't price fix, you've made ethics seem irrelevant, you've made it seem trivial, and it doesn't apply. So when you are teaching the law of ethics, that is those core things that they need to know so they don't get you in trouble, the compliance part, try to make it functionally specific. Try to make it practical. Use illustrations and examples and give it to people in a manner that they can best use and remember it, and that's not normally an oral presentation. So at least give them takeaways, have things online, and have somebody they can ask. Because most of the time, all you really hope they do is know there's a question there and they can ask somebody. But once you've got the informational part done of a compliance program, the next thing you have to be concerned with is what we call the discipline. One is discernment, can I discern right from wrong? And the second is discipline, will I do it? More problems have occurred within organizations, not because people were ignorant of the rules, it's because they chose not to follow them. They chose not to follow them because it wasn't practical, it didn't help. It didn't help them accomplish their goal. In fact, they might have felt that if they followed it, they might not meet their standards or their objectives for the particular quarter, and that they would be in more trouble if they didn't. So the fact is, we have to spend some time talking about people's willpower, the desire to do the right thing and to follow the law even when it doesn't seem beneficial. One of the most crucial definitions of character, but it even applies in the compliance area, is doing the right thing even when it costs more than you want to pay. So absolutely, your company needs a piece of its training that helps young people, every employee understand what they must do or not do. That's compliance. But if that's all you do, you're going to constantly find people who are pushing the line, who don't understand the difference between what they have a right to do and what is right to do. In fact, they get seduced by the notion of legalisms by saying, well, can I do this? And not ask the question of should they do it. That's why real ethics is important. So we distinguish between what we call big E ethics and little e ethics. What I just described to you is little e ethics. Little e because it's the rules. It's the rules that you have to follow. They're often made in codes and standards. But big E ethics are the principles of honesty and honor that if you follow, frankly, you don't have to worry that much about little e ethics because they're covered. Look, we did work for the Defense Department, and they wanted us to help them, and we're still trying to work with them, shift from what's called a compliance-based rules mentality to a values-based ethical culture. And what's the difference? The difference is the first one has to be instructional. What are the rules? How do you interpret them? And you practically make everybody lawyers. The Defense Department has a 6-hour briefing on gifts alone as to whether you can accept gifts. If we want to do it with principles, we say, look, you need to generate trust. Trust means people have to know you don't have self-interest. So here's the easy rule. Don't take anything from anybody who wants something from you. Here's the other side of it. Don't give anything to anybody who you want something from. If you understood those two principles, that would preclude all the need to get into the great detail. So while it is important to have a compliance program, and it is important that you've taken the steps, and you can frankly prove that you've taken the steps to see that your employees know what the rules are that apply to them, you will have far more success, and as a risk management strategy, a far wiser way if you also infuse in every employee the sense that you expect them to do the right thing from a big E ethical point of view. And that's where those 6 pillars of character come in. You want them to be trustworthy. You want them to treat everyone with respect. You want them to be fair. You want them to be caring. You want them to be responsible and to be good citizens and follow the law. So the point is, you need to have what we call a Compliance Plus program. And any program that relies specifically and entirely on a rules-based thing is based on the notion of coercion, will catch you and will punish you if you do it, and you won't, in fact, and it won't work. Whereas a program that's based on a values-based ethical culture is the idea of creating in people that desire to do the right thing and the discomfort of doing anything less. Because in the last analysis, character really does count.